So a daunting topic, a marriage, opponent to teammate. It's not that I treat my wife as an opponent all the time, but there's moments where I'm like, I am treating my wife as an opponent, and we're supposed to be teammates. And so one night, my wife asked me this question: why don't you tell me you love me anymore? I don't know if you got that question or not, but year 4 is probably not a good question to get that, to me, year 4 of our marriage, to get, why don't you tell me you love me anymore? And I, again, not thinking that my wife was an opponent, but I went into self-defense mode. It's like, what do you mean? Like, we got married in a church? Like, I said, I love you in front of, hundreds of people? Like, what, I of course I care for you. Thank God my wife asked me this question, challenged me. Is very humbling. So Matt mentioned married 24 years to my wife Pamela. I got 3 sons. We have a preference for In-N-Out. So some of you guys do the conviction, belief, and preference. Maybe it's a belief, and I think for my wife it's a conviction. She's from California. I'm just sharing lessons. I put learned, and I changed that to go, I'm learning. I am still learning. So there's some kind of 3 big lessons that I am learning in my own life and in my own marriage to have a marriage that actually thrives. And actually, because that marriage actually affects those 3 young men too. I'm not a guy that likes to tell you what to do, but you'll see that I had done that with my wife. It's really about just my background is I'm a sports guy, so it does take me a while to learn, the 6 Ps, right? Perfect practice prevents piss poor performance. So, you have to practice it over and over and over again, right? So I really think impact player cohorts, they really help. I was starting the cohort in the fall, and just what I share with my wife and the challenges that I got as a husband, as a father, as a leader, those things are the things that really just kind of like permeate and challenge my heart and my thinking of how I do things in my life. So, but first things, just to kind of get going here a little bit, you guys remember this guy? Oh yeah. Sergeant Holka? So he has very sound wisdom for us. And he says, your mamas are not here to take care of you. So one of the things I learned very quickly was that your wife is not your mom. Okay? Just make sure we're clear on that. Okay, your wife is not your mom. And so young guys, you're not going to marry your mom, you're marrying your wife. If you're newly married, just remember, she's not your mom. So that's always kind of stuck with me, and I've shared that with young men as well. I also call this I know Kung Fu, the I know Kung Fu complex or syndrome, right? Guys can think they can read a book. I know marriage. I download a bunch of podcasts about marriage. I know marriage. I know how to be a husband. Neo got downloading Kung Fu, and Morphe says, hey, show me. Show me if you really know it or not. So again, it's not all about just downloading things or reading things. It's really about how you put it into practice. So when did I realize I thought my wife as an opponent? As I was looking back in my marriage, I looked back, and it kind of all started with this. You guys know what this is? You young guys, you ever seen something like this? Backgammon. Two months before I'm married, I am crushing my wife in backgammon. And guys, you remember what this is called? The bridge, right? I had 2 of her pieces on that bridge. I blocked her out. I was stacking my pieces back, and I was just, I'm like, this is awesome. I look over, and she's just crying. She's crying. She's like, what is your deal? Like, this is a guy I married in 2 months. Because it was a challenge for me. So, lesson 1. You guys may have heard this song before. Lights will guide you home and ignite your bones, and I will try to fix you. Tears stream down your face. You guys know who wrote that? Coldplay. Okay. What's the lead singer's guys? Well, I don't know.
Chris Martin.
Yeah, Chris Martin. Okay. Everyone knows his ex-wife, Gwyneth Paltrow, though, right? And he wrote this song to her and for her to fix you. Anybody know if they're still together? Okay, thank you. I was trying to make a point. My blurred bias as a husband was my wife is the real problem. And I say blurred bias. Bias in the sense that it's a misconception I had, a false belief that my wife is the real problem. And so I'm trying to solve her like this crazy Rubik's Cube. Like, I got to fix this. I got to figure it out. I got to do all these things. And realizing that the truth is my wife is not a problem to solve, right? And how many times do we have our wives come to us and tell us something that's like, well, you know what you need to do? And come up with a couple of tricks or all these things. And, you know, my wife and I started out in ministry together, and she's like, I'm meeting with this gal. I was like, well, you need to just tell her she's in sin. Right? So she didn't need a problem solver. She needed a husband. Houston, we have a problem. That problem is me. I had to learn to ask questions, and guess what? I had to just ask questions and just listen. That was one of the most powerful things I had to learn, was just, and still learn, is just listen to my wife. Just listen to her, share her struggles, her problems. And sometimes, honestly, it does go to the point where my wife will say, like, I need your help to actually fix this, actually. So, because we've actually learned over the years, 24 years of marriage, that she's actually had to communicate to me. It's like, no, this is where I actually need you to step in and help me with the problem solving, okay? I appreciate that you're just listening, but now I actually need you to help out. So, but these are just the things that I had to struggle with through time. And what happened was listening helped us move from opponent to teammate. Because sometimes people talk about face-to-face, and I face-to-face conversation is what you need, but sometimes I think when you're face-to-face, you start kind of building up walls, because you start seeing your own faults, you start seeing your own inadequacies, and so you start building up walls, defense systems, and all of a sudden you don't even see your wife, and she's built up her wall, and then I've actually created a little turret in that wall that starts shooting arrows at her, and all of a sudden we are totally disconnected. Totally disconnected until we start tearing down those walls, and then we can move more shoulder to shoulder. So instead of the problem being in between us, we're shoulder to shoulder talking about the problem. Trying to help figure it out together, because we're in it together. We work together on the problem. Lesson 2. I read this author, Gary Thomas. He says, what if marriage is not about making you happy? It's not the way I thought it was supposed to be. What if marriage is not about making you happy? I wrestled with this question for a long time. A long time, because that's what you assume. The assumption is you get married and it's about making you happy. I mean, how many times have you heard it's like, oh, as long as he's happy, right? Even if it's something that's crazy that you wouldn't think would happen, they go, oh, as long as he's happy. But what if marriage is not about making you happy? You guys recognize that guy?
Yeah.
George Costanza. Independent George. The independent George, he's fun, the one that we love. And then there's relationship George. And you get the two together and worlds collide. And that was some of my feelings. Like, my wife is supposed to be joining me on what I'm doing. Because I'm Gary. I'm the football player or whatever it is, or the leader of this ministry or whatever. And so she joins my world. Otherwise, the worlds will collide. So as a bias, as a husband, another one is I'm supposed to be the boss, the leader, however you want to say it, the boss. What I say goes. In year 10 in our marriage, her dad is dying of cancer, and my selfishness comes out. She's visiting her dad, and she said her dad asked her to stay one more day. And I was like, you got to come home. I can't take care of these kids all by myself. Because I thought I was the boss. Then you remember this quote, I don't think it means what you think it means. Anybody know who that's from? Inigo Montoya. Gary, I don't think it means what you think it means. That boss, inconceivable. I don't think it means what you think it means. You have to have a different understanding of your leadership. And this is the verse for me from the good book, Ephesians 5, that is the pinnacle of all of it, and everything falls underneath. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Wow. That's a different definition of boss. That's a different definition of leader. That's a different definition of how you're supposed to treat your wife. So, learning, marriage is not a transaction. I was trying to look for transactions with my wife. What do I get out of this? Because I'm supposed to be happy, right? And that's a challenging question. What if marriage wasn't about making you happy? What if marriage is about transforming you? Transforming you. That's a different relationship you have with your wife when it's not an opponent, but a teammate. I learned that, and I'm still learning, that I'm being changed for the better. Take the ego out of it. Take what you think you know about what it means to be a man as far as the world's concerns. But you're being changed for the better. To me, it's the second most important relationship in my life. Besides my relationship with the Lord, it's the relationship with my wife is the second most important relationship I have. So how am I treating that relationship? How am I investing in that relationship? If it's the second most important relationship in my life, it's not my kids, and I've told my kids too. It's like, I love you, but whatever you're doing with mom right now is not right. I don't care. Because she is my most important relationship next to God. So, hard conversations. Part of our design, I believe, part of our design is to be teammates. It's part of our design. And when you push yourself to that, it's amazing what things can happen in your life. So as impact players, our other relationships will be better when our marriages are better. And Coach Shapiro said that last month, right? How many times guys noticed something's wrong with them? It's like, hey, how's your marriage going? Right? And that is a true statement. All right, lesson 3. And this is in some of the cohort material if you guys have seen it before, but has everybody heard of men are like waffles and women are like spaghetti? Compartmentalizing things. And I love it because I love that box, the nun box. Because my wife asked me, what are you thinking about? Nothing. I'm just enjoying this is nothing time. We're not saying it's good. I'm not giving you a free pass, but we do compartmentalize things. So when women are like spaghetti, where like the one meatball over here is all touching the other, parsley over here, and another meatball over on the other side of the plate. And there's times where we get up in the morning and my wife's mad at me. And I'm like, why are you mad at me? He's like, you were mean to me. I was like, when? In my dreams. I don't know. Stop watching Sopranos with your wife. But knowing the differences, you have to know what's going on. So if you want to do something and she just came off a hard conversation with a friend or a family member, it's like, it's not so easy to shift gears going like, okay, let's go do this, right? So my bias, the false assumption I have my wife is just impossible to understand. Just impossible to understand. Well, I'll tell you, my silence didn't help. And again, like I said, I'm a little slow to these things. So it was around year 6 in my marriage where I realized I was very silent with my wife. I didn't share with my wife. I shared things. We talked, surface level. We didn't share deep things that are going on. My dad just passed away from cancer. And I was processing things. And I was just silent with her. And all of a sudden, over dinner, or maybe we're just at the table and our kids were in bed, and I just said, I want to apologize. I've been silent. I haven't shared some deep hurt of losing my father with you at all. And I think you realize that that's wrong. She just starts crying, bawling. And she said, I'm crying tears of joy. I thought that our marriage was just going to be two people raising kids, no deep fellowship, no deep love, no connection, no deep connection with understanding who you really are. These are tears of joy. Because now we can really get to know each other. This is year 5, 6. I'm like, again, I'm not the quickest guy, not the sharpest tool in the shed here. So my silence did not help. And part of it had to do with communication. It's a big, like Coach Matt said, I've done so much marriage counseling, premarital counseling. Communication is so key to our marriages. It doesn't matter what stage of your marriage is in, if it's, decade 1 to decade 6. But I have this teddy bear. You're like, okay, Gary, what's communication? What's up with the teddy bear? Well, my wife had this teddy bear that her uncle gave her years ago. And you guys, anybody done that object game for communication? So you put the object down, and ours happened to be a teddy bear. And the person that picked it up is the one that can be able to talk. The other person can't say anything until the teddy bear goes back down on the table, and the other person can take up the teddy bear, because we were just talking back and forth so much that we would never get anything accomplished. We wouldn't be able to talk about anything because we didn't slow down to listen. So the teddy bear was worn out. I think it fell apart. So but communication is key. And I just want to throw this up here. I don't have time to go through all this. But From Love and Respect, it's a great book. And how many times we've been on that crazy cycle that I would only love her if she respected me, and she would only respect me if I loved her. This crazy cycle until I realized it didn't matter what she did, but I have to love her regardless of her respect, and her respect regardless of my love to her. So it was this constant cycle that you get on, but you can get off. And I encourage you guys, if you want to, and it's in some of the cohort material as well, get into that. But I had to reject passivity. My silence was so deafening that, again, when I confessed that to my wife, tears of joy coming down her face. Reject passivity. Bring up whatever I have to bring up. The silence can kill marriages so easily. I had to realize my wife is not a micromanager. When she asked me about my day, and I said, good, she wants more. Not because she's checking on me going like, well, did he do that right? Why would he do that? Like, why does he need to check the air in his tires? Why does he, she wants to be with me in the journey. She wants to be a part of my life. She's not micromanaging. So sharing what's going on through our day, the challenges that we have, the struggles we have, the joys that we have, the great things, the great conversations that we've had, she wants to be a part of that. She wants to be a part of that. So and a lot of times it's talking about expectations, which reduce a lot of frustrations in my life and in our marriage. It gets to a point sometimes like we're about to go on vacation. I just want to know your expectations. And I'll show you with my expectations, because sometimes my idea of vacation looks a lot different than her idea of vacation. Like I like to come home from vacation not needing another vacation. And sometimes, she wants to have a vacation so she can plan the next vacation. So it's just, it manages expectations, is super key. I realize when I talk with my wife, it's not about keeping accounts. And I always say when we're in conversation these days, no bookkeeping. No bookkeeping. I'm not going to bring something up in the past to add fodder to our marriage right now. No bookkeeping. It's very easy to do we do it all the time. I get it. Like, hey, it was my turn to change diapers. Now your turn. We do that bookkeeping like that. But you start doing with little things, and all of a sudden you're doing with a lot of things. So let's not keep accounts on things. We got to keep those accounts clean. The power of forgiveness. In forgiveness, I have a simple definition of forgiveness is giving up the right to get even with the other person. The power of forgiveness is so huge in marriages. In that, like I shared that moment about telling my wife she had to come home when her father was dying of cancer. That didn't get resolved until like 3 years ago. And he passed away in 2009. So the power of forgiveness is huge. forgiving and asking forgiveness. Reject passivity and ask for forgiveness. Forgiveness is the power of the gospel. Les Mis is one of my favorite storylines. And this is actually, I have a picture of this movie because it's not the non-singing version with Liam Neeson. If you haven't seen it, you got to watch it. But the power of forgiveness drastically changes people's lives. It's amazing. So I make time with my teammate a priority. I make time with my teammate a priority. And if we're really busy, and we have been, and taking over this executive director role here, I've been busy, and we have to, it sounds silly, but looking at your calendar going, where is our time? Let's do that together. Where is our time where we make it a priority that we are connecting with one another? And on your tables, I'm not saying, again, I'm not telling you what to do, just a suggestion. We have these check-in questions that we do once a week. Sometimes we get through them all. Sometimes we only get through like one or two. But we want to know what's going on in each other's lives. What are we learning? What are we struggling with? And it's amazing how connected you feel with your spouse. And if you guys aren't married yet, just thinking about this as you're planning your own future, right? How can I connect with my communication? Work on your communication now. Work on your communication now. And then you know what I do? I do a lot of praying. And I pray for my wife, but ultimately I pray to understand my wife. And that's a turn. That's a turn for some people maybe. Because we pray for our wives, go, yeah, I hope she does, if she figures this out, and they go back to that problem solving again, right? Pray to understand your wife. Lord, help me understand who she is. How can I let her flourish? How can I treat her as Christ treated the church? Let her flourish. Pray to understand your wife. So in conclusion, give a little story about the Drift King. And I'm not talking about the Drift King from Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. Okay? Thanks to my son for introducing me to that movie. Talking about a different Drift King, King David. Now, some of you guys in cohorts had gone through this recently, this story of David and his mighty men, and which is powerful because there's this King David. If you guys aren't familiar with it, in the olden days, before Apple iPhones, and he had these group of guys, and he was a young guy in his 20s, and man, and it shares these stories, these mighty men. These guys are just like, killing like tons of people with a spear, and like this one guy kills a tiger in a snowy cave. I mean, imagine trying to fight in the snow with a tiger. All these things about these mighty men, and he goes like, if I just had some water from the well in Bethlehem, it will remind me of my home. And so these three guys of this mighty men go and fight their way through. And I mean, I'm trying to figure this out. Like, they're fighting these guys off, and then they must have like a wineskin or something like that and then it's not just, grab a bottle of water. They got to go get into the well, bring the water out, put it into something that they can carry back, all the time fighting off these guys to get the water for their leader, David. So then they come back and they bring the water, and David goes, wow, you guys brought the water for me? He's like, you guys could have died for that. I'm going to offer this to the Lord because these guys were so great. To pour the one out for the homies, right? So that's how much they cared about this guy, David. And how much David cared about these guys to pour out the water is because I'm just blown away by the fact that you would do this for me. That's the kind of connection they had as men. But as the story goes, David, as he gets more kingly, he gets in his capital city, he gets into his palace. The days of him going to war with his mighty men are over, and he's just on his rooftop checking things out, and he sees this beautiful woman. He's like, I got to have that. So he has an affair with Bathsheba, finds out she's pregnant, And then he's like, well, who's the husband? It's one of those guys listed with the mighty men earlier. One of his own mighty men. And David gets that guy killed. There's amazing, that's why we have these stories. These stories show how damaging it can be when we drift. And I was sharing stories already how I've drifted as a husband. I'm sure there's a lot of times we have drifted in our lives. Man, we can't drift. We're in a time and in a place, in a setting, in an area of the country where we cannot have men drift. Because all it takes is just one little drift. It may not seem that far in the beginning, but as time goes on, that drift is further and further apart. You're not alone. You're not alone. And I know this is a plug for whatever it is. It doesn't have to be Impact Player Cohort, but we have Impact Player Cohorts everywhere for guys to get plugged in. Get plugged in. Don't drift. You're not alone. Be with other guys. And it doesn't matter if they're already going. Get involved. You don't have to say anything. You can just sit there. Just say, like, I just want to observe for a while. Till you're comfortable. But there is great leaders, and there's a lot of cohorts in the area to get you guys plugged in so that you're not alone, to help you with your drift. Let's stop drifting.